Despite the ban from a federal judge, the White House says it is going to continue to urge social media sites to promote responsible actions. Listen.
We are going to continue to promote responsible actions to protect public health, safety, and security when confronted by challenges like a deadly pandemic and foreign attacks on our elections. So we're going to continue to do that to promote that in a responsible way. Our view remains that social media platforms have a critical responsibility to take action or to take account of the effects of their platforms are having to the American people.
Or you could say we want them to say what we want them to say. Jeff Landry, the Louisiana Attorney General, joins me now. Attorney General, great to see you. And in fact, you spearheaded this ban. Well, now the DOJ has already appealed and has asked to put that court order on hold. I mean, does this case make it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court? What do you think?
I think it does. Look, I've been saying since last year that this is arguably one of the most important First Amendment cases, certainly in modern history. I mean, what we're seeing is a transition from the real and physical public square to a virtual public square, and the First Amendment should be transposed from one to the other. I mean, you don't get an exception to the First Amendment because we have a pandemic. You don't get an exception to the First Amendment if we're at war. I mean, for all of our history, the government has been able to maneuver around that without suppressing the rights of its citizenry. And under this court case, this judge does an unbelievable job in 154 pages of laying out how the government is trying to muzzle its citizens.
Yeah, and they kind of hide behind, say, the COVID issue because they use that clearly to curb any views of which they disagreed with. And I think that kind of shook up the social media companies who felt, you know, we've got the administration on our back, so they caved to them. And that's, as to your point, that's a dangerous precedent to set.
That's correct. I mean, look, that's a violation of the First Amendment. If the government creates an agency, if they coerce some person, some private actor, to basically engage in conduct that otherwise they would be prohibited from under the Constitution, then guess what? That's a violation. We've got plenty of Fourth and Fifth Amendment cases that the Supreme Court has handed down in that vein, and that's what the judge found.
You know, let me ask you about this. President Obama's Attorney General, going back now, Eric Holder, he's also weighing in on the ban. He calls the decision from the court stupid and potentially dangerous. I don't understand that. How do you respond?
Look, again, that's what they like to confuse this. Nothing in this order prevents the government to giving out and putting out information to its citizenry. No one's trying to silence the government. We're just trying to keep the government from silencing citizens.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So to your point, it's not dangerous at all.
No, it's not dangerous at all. The government is free to go out there. The problem is that the Americans have had lost more and more credibility with the government. In other words, they just don't believe the government anymore.
Right.
Why? Because the government does things and then they do one thing and then they do another. They say one thing and it turns out not to be true. And so that's what creates the disinformation and misinformation. It's the government's credibility that's the problem, not the First Amendment, not the Constitution. It's the Biden administration's hypocrisy.
I'm interested, Attorney General, how did you end up spearheading this? I mean, obviously it's something that's very important to you, but how did you end up taking the lead?
Well, look, back then, now U.S. Senator Eric Schmitt was the Attorney General of Missouri. Him and I and our staffs basically worked on this legal theory, and we used case law from Fourth and Fifth Amendment cases where we said, well, wait a minute, if the government creates an actor, if they go to a private citizen, ask them to go into your home and search for something that they believe, some criminal activity they believe you're engaged in, then guess what? That's a Fifth and Fourth Amendment violation. However, it's the same here. When the government goes out and acts a private actor to basically infringe upon your First Amendment, that which they couldn't do on their own, then that is, again, a violation of the First Amendment. That's the legal theory that this case was based around. When we filed it, they said they were going to run us out of court. And then all of a sudden, the judge granted us discovery. Remember, we deposed Dr. Anthony Fauci right before Thanksgiving,
Right.
Elvis Chan with the FBI, and look at all of the things that we found.
Yes, indeed. We'll have to leave it there, Attorney General, but we're, of course, going to be following this very closely indeed. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting stuff.